I really don't see this as revolutionary. I just think that this was a big marketing thing of like, we flipped it on top of its head. Like we're taking what's old and we're flipping it over. And that is just like, it's almost like we're throwing it in the trash. Like we're changing it. It's a 180. Even though in reality, when you read the dietary guidelines, it is not a 180. So the image is a 180. It's a flipping it on its head type of thing. But the reality of the guidelines is not a complete 180.
Did you know the average woman spends 7 years of her life dealing with period pain? WaveBye believes it's time to get those years back. Founded by an OBGYN, WaveBye is the first science-backed solution that regulates menstrual cycle and reduces period pain before it even starts. WaveBye has 3 products. By Irregularity from WaveBye is designed to help your cycle find its rhythm again. Packed with clinically studied nutrients like inositol, magnesium, and chasteberry, By Irregularity supports healthy ovulation, hormone balance, and smoother, more predictable cycles without prescription or hormones. By Cramps and By Bad Cramps are the proactive premenstrual products that target the prostaglandin messengers that cause cramps and heavy bleeding, so your life doesn't have to stop every month. Think of it as the new Midol, backed by science, built by women, and designed to keep you feeling like yourself. Join the thousands who have already said it's absolutely life-changing, including myself. I've been taking this product every day for nearly 6 months. I take By Irregularity and By Cramps, and it has absolutely reduced my cramping and regulated my cycle. It is super predictable. So head to waveby.co and use the code Lindsey Cortes for 10% off. Say bye to irregular or painful cycles and hi to your true rhythm. Because when your cycle's in sync, everything else just flows. Lindsey Cortes for 10% off your WaveBye purchase.
Hey fans, it's Lindsey Elizabeth Cortes, registered dietitian, sports dietitian, and your host of the podcast. I have a solo episode today. I wanted to quickly discuss the new USDA food guidelines, the dietary guidelines for Americans, and the food pyramid that was released in 2026. I know that this is old news. The guidelines were released in January of 2026, and I'm recording this episode at the end of February and probably going to release it at the end of March at some point. So I'm like 2 months late. This is just a little bit of how I react to news. Is I like to let it settle. I like to digest it, for my nutrition pun there, and give myself the time to research it instead of just having a reaction based on somebody's, quick social media post or reel or YouTube short. So a lot of people in my industry were reacting very quickly, and I'm not saying that their reactions were wrong. I'm just saying they were reacting right away, and I didn't participate in that. But if you care to hear my thoughts and opinions, that's what today's episode is about. So real quick, let's just talk about what these dietary guidelines even are. As an FYI, they are released every 5 years by the USDA. The USDA is the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and it is a federal executive department, so it is government funded and run, and they're responsible for a lot of things beyond just guiding Americans in what to eat nutrition-wise. They're responsible for policies on farming and agriculture as well, which relates to food and nutrition, obviously. Forestry, rural development is in there. And then, the nutrition piece. And so what the USDA sets guidelines and policies for nutrition then has so many down trickling effects as to, hey, what are we putting in school lunches, or what are government subsidized programs paying for? So I want to be transparent. I am not the expert on community nutrition or government nutrition. Never have been. I never have been. So I will not cross over any boundaries on this podcast. I'm just going to, as a registered dietitian, look at the dietary guidelines and give you my feedback. So I want to repeat again that the USDA has been creating dietary guidelines for Americans that are updated every 5 years, and they've been doing this since like the early 1900s. I don't know exactly when. Sorry, that's something you can Google real quick if you're real interested. But this has been going on for many, 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 many a years. And we've had images of food guides and food pyramids for like well over 50 years. I think the first one was somewhere around the 1950s. They have morphed and changed over time. I would say people listening to the podcast might be familiar with a food pyramid that was adjusted in the early 2000s to include exercise. And it was this pyramid with little steps walking up to and say, hey, part of being healthy isn't just food, it's exercise. And then we switched over to this thing. We got rid of the pyramid completely and we switched over to this thing called the MyPlate, which was more of a visual of your plate and what to look at on your plate and how to divide your plate. So there's the food dietary guidelines, which is a document explaining things with words and numbers and charts and graphs. And then we have the image, which is either a food pyramid or a food plate, which is more of just an image that catches your eye and tries to help people make better decisions around their food. And so I do believe that the most massive change over the years was the switch from a traditional food pyramid, which was rather confusing, of how many servings to eat and what was in each food group. It was confusing. I admit that the food pyramid was confusing. And I think the switch to the MyPlate, I actually thought that was revolutionary because it was just this nice image of like how to divide my plate. And maybe it oversimplified things because we didn't get into, well, what types of grains do I put on my plate? What type of protein do I put on my plate? So it definitely, in many ways, oversimplified. But I think that it was revolutionary because it was like nobody really understood the food pyramid. And then, I can just make a quarter of my plate carbohydrate and a quarter of my plate protein and a quarter of my plate fruit and a quarter of my plate vegetables. And that should land me in the ballpark of being healthy according to the USDA. So I thought that was really helpful. Now what's happened in 2026, or the guidelines for 2025 to 2030, these are the next 5-year guidelines, is they went back to a pyramid, but they inverted it. I really think this was more of a marketing thing. Actually, before I continue, I should pause and just say that I'm going to really try and not make this conversation political, although USDA is a government-run agency program, so obviously politics are 100% involved, and which administration is currently in office is going to play a role. There is, it's just a fact that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the Secretary of Health and Human Sciences for the USA right now. So whether you like him, voted for his administration, like his administration or not, it just is what is. So yes, the new USDA guidelines came out under their administration. If any of my political beliefs come through on this episode, that's not my intention to do so. I'm trying to just look at the nutrition here. So, okay, that was my disclaimer. And I'm not doing that out of fear of politics. I'm just and I'm just really staying in my lane, and I'm not against people who go outside their lane, because again, it's like, well, when people are like, well, nutrition is political, I get that argument. I'm just not in a place right now where that's something I need to or want to do on this podcast. So getting back to how these new guidelines released took the pyramid and inverted it. I really don't see this as revolutionary. I just think that this was a big marketing thing of we flipped it on top of its head. We're taking what's old and we're flipping it over. And that is just like, it's almost like we're throwing it in the trash, like we're changing it. It's a 180, even though in reality, when you read the dietary guidelines, it is not a 180. So the image is a 180. It's a flipping it on its head type of thing. But the reality of the guidelines is not a complete 180. It's not really a massive change. So that was the administration's and the USDA's big marketing. And I do think it worked in that sense of like getting people's attention. And this is where, again, I don't want this to be political, but whether or not you like what's going on with the political landscape and with the movement of Make America Healthy Again, it is a conversation. It's a conversation that the everyday person wasn't having before and maybe is more aware of now. You can definitely argue, yeah, but they're being aware of the wrong thing or unhelpful things. But there's some marketing there of like, hey, something new is happening. And maybe this gets people listening. And so if you feel that they're listening to the wrong things now, well, I think there's a lot of people arguing for that. So there's a lot of voices to be heard these days with the internet and social media. So I do think that the marketing is working in the sense of people are having a conversation about nutrition a bit more. But yeah, only time will tell if it's positive or not. But that's what I want to say about the actual like food pyramid. Like the visual does nothing for me other than marketing of we flipped it on its head. But like the visual doesn't do much for me. It doesn't tell me what to eat, how much to eat, or really how to eat. But it is different than the old food pyramid, which in the old food pyramid, the bottom of it was about what to eat the most of. And it definitely said grains, carbohydrates, whole grains. And then at the top was like oils and added sugars. And now what we've got is the new pyramid, which is an inverted pyramid. The top of it is what to eat the most of, which is protein, dairy, healthy fats, fruits, and vegetables. And at the bottom is the carbohydrates and whole grains. I even just with this visual, I think everything that's on here is good. So it's funny because the old pyramid had things like the added sugars or the unhealthy fats and said like in moderation. And yet in this visual, those aren't even on here, which is the message. Like the website has even changed. It's a realfood.gov now. The message is eat real food. And I'm not against that message. It's a great message to eat real food. That's a great message. And again, thinking about this being a government entity, if the USDA's message is eat real food, then maybe that will help in things like our supplemental government programs and in our school lunches to get more real food and less ultra processed foods in there. So I'm okay with that. But I do think it's, if people are mad at the old food pyramid for even having added sugars in there, that's because it was trying to be realistic to what somebody would consume. It's like, hey, if you're going to eat sugars, just make sure that we're limiting it. And on here, the thing that's limited is whole grains. On this image, the lowest thing to consume is whole grains. And that's actually quite odd because you should eat whole grains. So the food pyramid in this one, it's saying this is what you should eat. And it's saying do eat whole grains, but limit them compared to protein, dairy, healthy fats, fruits, and vegetables. Whereas the other one, I hope you're following me, like the thing to limit was the added sugars because it was trying to be like realistic that, hey, you might eat them, but let's limit them. Anyways, again, my takeaway here is the image does very little for me. And I also, as this is the Female Athlete Nutrition Podcast, I just have to clarify this up front right now. Like the bulk of your diet is and should be carbohydrates. So yes, eat real food. Yes, prioritize protein and healthy fats, fruits, and vegetables, but you're going to need more carbohydrates. So I went through and I read beyond just the image, I read the dietary guidelines. And this is one other benefit to the new dietary guidelines. I think. The benefit is that it is only 10 pages long. So that was really quick to read, easy to read, and I would encourage you to read it. Whereas the 2020 to 2025 guidelines was 149 pages long. You probably weren't going to read that. So it's interesting though, because out of the 10 pages that currently exist, they're actually really similar to the old guidelines. The old guidelines just go way more in depth. They go way more in depth with numbers and serving sizes and portion sizes and recommended dietary allowances. And you just don't get that in the new one. It's super simplified. Eat real food. But in that sense, maybe more Americans will actually read it. I'll post the link in the chat, like read it, because it's only 10 pages. It's really quick to read. And I want to get back to this athletic piece here because that's why you're listening. You're an athlete or a female athlete or somebody who supports a female athlete. So regarding the carbohydrate piece and the whole grain piece, which the new guidelines are saying like basically limit carbohydrate. And what it really says is to limit refined carbohydrate. But it does bother me that per 2,000 calorie diet, it says 2 to 4 servings of grains per day is adequate. And then if we actually read, they have a supplemental resource called Daily Servings by Calorie Limit. And it lists what a serving is. So a serving is like a half a cup of cooked oats or 1 slice of bread. And so 2 to 4 servings would be just like 1 cup of oats and 2 slices of bread would be 4 servings per day on a 2,000 calorie diet. And that's just not going to work if you're athletic and if you care about your performance. If we go up to like a 3,200 calorie diet, it has guidelines for that as well. And it obviously allows more carbohydrate if you have a higher calorie diet. So if we assume you are an athlete, you do need more calories. You could have up to, it says 6.5 servings, which, I mean, that would be like 3 cups of oats or 6.5 slices of bread in an entire day. And I actually still, if you then do like sports nutrition guidelines of grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight per day, and you are an athlete and you are a competitive athlete, this is still not going to be enough carbohydrate. Now remember, we get carbohydrate from more than just grains. So you do get carbohydrate from fruit, from dairy, from vegetables. But the limited recommendation on grains does bother me because I'm coming from the sports nutrition background. So I will recommend and direct you to listen to some past podcast episodes. Episode number 103, titled Stop Cutting the Carbs. And actually just released a couple months ago, episode number 248, The Science of Sugar. I think those will be 2 helpful episodes to listen to. Episode 103 and 248, Stop Cutting Carbs and the Science of Sugar, will be helpful for you to understand your carbohydrate need as a high-performing athlete and even understand the role of sugar in carbohydrates to help your performance. One more episode I can throw in there is episode 195 about during training fuel, because you want all of your during training fuel to be easily digestible carbohydrates to include sugars. So episode 103, 248, 195 will help you in understanding as an athlete, what are my carbohydrate goals? Because I don't think you should follow the 2025 to 2030 USDA Dietary Guidelines for Americans on their carbohydrate and grain recommendation. I'll also say one difference. I wanted to point out a difference from the old and the new guidelines. The old guidelines said, hey, make half your grains whole grains. And I think, again, that's coming from the old guidelines being very realistic to what can people actually achieve. So let's actually get at least half of our grains be whole grains. And I mean, the new guidelines are just like, eat whole grains. Like, eat real food, eat whole grains, don't have refined carbohydrates. Well, I want to remind you, first and foremost, as an athlete, you will need to have some refined carbohydrates, because if you eat all whole grains and all fruits and vegetables, you're going to overload your system with fiber. You're going to be pooping your pants during a race and during practice and during competition. You're going to have GI issues. Now, fiber is supposed to help your GI system, absolutely. And I love that the new guidelines even have a little blurb about the benefits of gut bacteria and nurturing your gut microbiome. I love that. And yet I do want to caution you as an athlete, not all of your carbohydrates or grains should be whole grains, but let's try and hit a fiber goal of at least 25, 30 grams of fiber a day, which could come from whole grains or could come from beans, which are a plant-based protein source. They could come from fruit and vegetables. So you can diversify your fiber intake, and all your grains don't have to be whole grains. So I actually prefer the old guidelines on recommending at least half your grains be whole grains, and give yourself permission to have some, as an athlete, give yourself permission to have refined carbohydrates, including sugar. It's going to help your performance. It's going to help your gut and GI system not be so overwhelmed and bloated and in pain and pooping all the time. And I'm saying pooping, but we know it can be worse than that. Diarrhea on the run during practice. We don't want that. Oh my gosh. Another current events type of thing. Alex Honnold, he's an American rock climber, but I mean, I've been watching him for years, but he just climbed a building in, was it Taiwan? Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm not good with current events, but he's like making national headlines again, and he's been on some great podcasts. And one podcast host actually had the guts to ask him, how do you go to the bathroom when you're rock climbing? And he was just like, yeah, you just go. So you just go. Obviously, some of his climbs that take a really long time, they, pitch a tent, but at the end of the day, they're still dumping it over the tent. So beware to the people below. But again, I'm just making a joke here. As an athlete, like, you're gonna have to pee and poop and all that, but you also don't want to overwhelm your GI system. Okay. Sorry guys, this is not what I meant to talk about on this episode. Let's move on.
Fans, I'm pausing the conversation again to check in on you. Are you concerned that you have REDS? That's relative energy deficiency in sport. It's a syndrome of not ideal health consequences and performance consequences that all stem from the idea that you're not fueling optimally or fueling enough for your sport needs. I've become an expert in this over the years because, unfortunately, a lot of female athletes struggle with this. We have research that shows sometimes up to 90% of female athletes might be suffering from at least one of the side effects of REDS. Other research says that up to 45% of female athletes are struggling with disordered eating. These are big statistical numbers, and I don't like it. I'm here to help you become fierce, fit, and fueled. So first and foremost, head to lindseycortes.com/REDS to learn more about REDS, listen to past podcast episodes, and take our free REDS quiz to see if this might be a concern for you. From there, I've got 3 ways to help you. 1, download the REDS Recovery Guide and start taking action right away. 2, join our REDS Recovery membership. For a very affordable $15 a month, you will have access to me as a sports dietitian to educate and empower you to fuel better. We meet once a week for live calls, Q&A. You have access to the recordings if you can't join live, and a community group chat to support, encourage, and motivate you along the way to fuel fiercely. Last, spots are limited for one-on-one help, but I can help you personally through one-on-one coaching, be it my Fast Track program, the Female Athlete System of Transformation, or perhaps Fuel School, depending on your age. All of that is on my website, lindseycortes.com. But because one-on-one spots are limited, I really want to encourage you to join the REDS Recovery membership. We live in a world where it's very easy to just pop online, read an article, listen to a podcast, and I think we do a decent job at getting information out there, but we all need someone to talk to. And really ask those personal questions, and also be open and honest in a community that's going to support you in your fueling needs and goals. And that's exactly what this membership is. So only $15 a month. We meet once a week, and you will be provided with so much education and empowerment and support. I know you won't regret joining. Head to lindseycortes.com/REDS, and there you will see the REDS Recovery membership that you can join, and join us this week. It's time for you to be fierce, fit, and fueled.
The next thing that I like about the new guidelines is I like the increased protein recommendation. So the old guidelines definitely said, like, eat protein, eat lean protein, but they were still stuck on the recommended dietary allowance of 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight per day. And as a sports dietitian, I've never recommended that small of an amount. I've always recommended like 1.2 all the way up to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight per day. And that's been for sports nutrition. But the reality is, I've also found, well, like, I just think the higher protein diet works for a lot of people. We know we've got so much new emerging evidence about the benefits of muscle to help your bones, to help anti-aging, to boost your metabolism. So whether or not you're an athlete, it's like having more muscle mass on you is helpful. And now eating more protein does not directly translate into having more muscle mass. Exercise needs to help with that as well, which, the USDA is recommending exercise as well. But there are other benefits to a slightly higher protein diet. And I did think that the RDA of 0.8 grams per kilogram was quite just like outdated. Like, okay, this is like a minimum amount. And why are we recommending a minimum? We should be recommending what is healthy. So I appreciate that the new guidelines set a protein target for the average American to be 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram per day. And that can work for a lot of athletes as well. Some athletes absolutely need more, depending on your sport and like what your demands are. An endurance athlete might be great at this amount because they need to prioritize higher carbohydrate. But a strength athlete might need even more protein than this. But I do think for the everyday American, I'm glad that they are recommending more protein. And again, it is stemming from it's not saying have more protein powder. It's saying eat real food. So eat more meat, eat more beans, eat more dairy to get your protein in. And I think that's great. Another huge change, well, I don't know if it's that huge actually, but the messaging is different, that it's saying you can eat the protein that is high fat protein, you can eat red meat and steak. And it's not that the old guidelines ever said don't eat red meat, but I think the old guidelines did trend more towards watch your fat, limit your fat, choose low fat protein. And these new guidelines say eat real food, even if it's a high fat protein. You can eat whole fats that are natural fats. In general, I agree with this messaging. What's a little contradictory though is that the current guidelines still recommend that you limit your saturated fat to just 10%. And it's just that in reality, if you take their message of eat whole fats, like whole fat dairy, whole milk, and high fat steak, you're probably going to be over that 10% saturated fat recommendation. So I'm going off a 2,000 calorie diet, and I'm not saying you should eat that, but in a 2,000 calorie diet, if you had 6 ounces of a medium to high fat, like red meat, 6 ounces of red meat, 8 ounces of whole milk, and 1 tablespoon of butter a day, you'd be probably above your 10% saturated fat intake in a 2,000 calorie diet already. And so that's pretty moderate. You might have had 3 ounces of meat at lunch and 3 ounces of meat at dinner and 1 8-ounce glass of whole milk and 1 tablespoon of butter, whether it was spread throughout the day or cooked with dinner, and you're going to be probably exceeding that saturated fat. So it's just a little contradictory. I am a huge fan of whole fats, and I found that in our athletic population, we need to get more calories. We need to support our hormone function. And specific to athletes who have an experience of underfueling or are going through REDS recovery, which I have a membership for, by the way. If you've been listening to the podcast, join my REDS recovery membership program. It is exclusive to female athletes, but I've actually found that the higher fat and higher saturated fat intake is really, really helpful for recovery, for satiation, and for just giving your body those extra nutrients and calories that it needs to sustain high performance. So this is a mixed one for me. I appreciate the new guidelines promoting, you can have fat and whole fat. I appreciate that. And yet, when you read it in writing, it's this is still kind of tricky to do. So I'm not sure exactly where to go from there. I think it's just that balance too of remembering okay, I can have steak, I can have whole milk, and then let's also get some let's get some low fat fish in from time to time. Let's have beans as a source of protein from time to time, which is a plant-based protein and therefore lower fat. Or maybe even diversify the dairy. Like maybe you get whole fat milk, but you do reduced fat yogurt, like 2% or something. I do think the old guidelines were too much emphasis on reduced fat and low fat. It was like, I'm not going to buy low fat cheese. That's personally disgusting in my personal opinion. It just doesn't taste good. I'm not going to do that. It doesn't satiate me. It doesn't fill me up. And, I'm not going to buy low fat ice cream either because I just end up eating twice as much. I'm going to get something that actually like satiates me, feels good, makes me feel nourished, fueled, or satisfied, and move on. And I think a lot of people are recognizing that of like, oh, if I just eat whole fats, that's helpful. But again, remember, you can have fats that are avocado, you can have fats that are nuts, and you're going to get a few more of those monounsaturated or essential omega-3 fats that are anti-inflammatory. So we still want to have caution with saturated fat, but having it in your diet is not a bad thing. You can have saturated fat in your diet, but just diversify those fat sources is my recommendation to you. Okay, the last thing that I thought was like different and I liked about the new guideline was it really just flat out said limit alcohol. And it didn't say don't have alcohol, but it said limit alcohol because it doesn't help you. Whereas the old guidelines actually set a recommended amount of 2 glasses or servings of alcohol per day for men and 1 glass or serving of alcohol per day for women, which set the tone that you could have 1 alcoholic drink per day and be healthy. And the new guidelines are just like, no, limit that. And I think that is the reality. I don't think that is the reality. I'm not saying everybody listening needs to be sober, nor am I even following that practice entirely myself, although my alcohol intake is quite small and drastically reduced, both for health reasons, for sleep reasons, it disrupts my sleep, for motherhood reasons. I would say the biggest reason is like I just can't afford to have anything that compromises my sleep, my energy levels, my health. Those are my personal reasons. There's a lot of other reasons, but truly from a nutrition aspect, although I like, eating foods in moderation and go out to dinner with friends and enjoy yourself and, like, hey, even emotional eating, like, what, sometimes having a bowl of ice cream makes me feel happy. And as long as I'm not depending on that for my happiness, that's okay. If it's just an occasional thing, if it's part of my coping strategies along with meditation and exercise and deep breathing, that's okay. So I can understand the same thing with alcohol, as some people are like, I just want to have, a margarita with my friends or a glass of wine to relax, as long as that is not your sole relaxation method and it's not an all the time everyday thing. Like, I understand, like, I'm not judging, but as far as the guidelines go, what are we putting out there as a government to say this is what is healthy? I'm actually glad that they have updated to just say limit alcohol. We're not saying it's okay to have 1 or 2 drinks. We're not saying that anymore because alcohol is a true toxin. So me as a dietitian, you're never going to hear me say sugar's a toxin, because it's not, because you need sugar to survive. Your brain runs on blood glucose. You die without glucose. You die without it. So I'm never going to say sugar's a toxin, but alcohol is a direct toxin. The moment it enters your body, bad things start happening. Your liver struggles. It does know how to metabolize it, but it disrupts the liver as it's doing so. So yeah, again, there's no judgment from me if you consume or participate in that. But I think if we're putting out dietary guidelines for health, we shouldn't continue to pretend like this is healthy. And it's reminiscent, though I didn't live through the era, but it's reminiscent of days of like the smoking industry, where it was continued to push that, like, oh, you can have X amount of cigarettes a day and that's healthy, or that's cool, or might, like, literally I've seen ads, because again, I didn't live through this, but I've seen ads and have read things in the history books about them promoting like, oh, like smoking might even help you stay skinny. Just like terrible messaging like that, because it would suppress your appetite and you'd smoke instead of eat. And it's like, whoa, 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 this is not healthy. This is actually not healthy at all. And fortunately, in 2026, we've come a long way since then to know that smoking is not healthy, and how severely that impacts your health and increases cancer risk and lung cancer risk and breathing problems. Anyways, I'm just drawing parallels. I see that in the alcohol industry as well, that for many years we've kind of been faking it, that you can like, oh, alcohol can be part of a healthy diet. And I'm proud of the guidelines right now just saying, no, limit that. It's not. So I think that was a positive change. So I think maybe my final comments are just, again, one more positive and one more negative. That the USDA having this real food push, I think can be positive, because the whole point of the dietary guidelines for Americans are now to change policies. And how might this affect things? Will this affect things like SNAP benefits? Will this affect things like what's in school lunches? And it should. We'll see how it plays out, because money and finances come into play. But if it forces the big food companies, and I mean the big food companies, to have to change their products so that they can still be on school lunch menus or still be included in SNAP, which is supplemental nutrition money to families of lower income who need help there, then this could be really helpful. I think like nothing is going to be an immediate benefit, right? Because processed foods and ultra processed foods are cheaper. And so that's why it's been helpful for people who are on low income, that, hey, we can still get food, we can still get calories, we can still get nourishment. But the idea here, I'm not saying that it will play out perfectly, but the idea is that if we change the guidelines, it will force the big food companies to change their foods, which will allow more people to have access to healthier food. I know it's a huge conversation. One of the critiques of the new guidelines is that people in food deserts or lower income can't afford the healthier food. But if it works the right way, and I don't know that it will, but if it works the right way, then we can force big food companies to improve their food and food quality. I also do want to point out that there are a lot of government-funded food programs that I'm really proud of, that I'm really proud that we as Americans offer these to families who are struggling and people who are struggling financially. But I also sometimes do get frustrated with the quality of food that I see. I mean, just last year, my church did a huge food drive with the local food bank, and I was actually disheartened to see so many people get their free food. I'm glad they're getting free food, but it was like, I mean, it was graham crackers and applesauce pouches and soda. And I was like, oh, those graham crackers and applesauce pouches would be great for the athletes. But the reality was the people that were using the food bank and using these donations didn't appear to be in great health. They certainly didn't appear to be athletic. They were struggling with their health. And then here we are giving them food, which they needed. And I was disappointed in what I visually saw. It's a problem. It's definitely a problem to fix. And SNAP, I was researching too, because it's a conversation about getting soda. The current administration is talking about getting soda off of the SNAP benefits. And yeah, I was even like, yeah, why not? And it's surprising. There are studies that show that the average household that uses SNAP benefits spend 5 to 7% on sugar of their SNAP benefits. 5 to 7% of their SNAP benefits are spent on sugary beverages. And hey, if that's 100% fruit juice, that's okay. But if it's soda, that's not okay. And a few other reports, and I've gotten these from NPR as my source, that up to $60 billion in taxpayer money can be spent on soda and sugary snacks. And it's like, oh yeah, why are we doing that? You know, let's get better quality food to those who need SNAP benefits. Let's get better quality food to them. And again, I'm not anti-sugar. That's not what I'm saying here. It's just, Let's make sure that the money and the food that we are supplying those in need is actually helping their health at the same time. That's the extent I'm going to say on it. And hey, if you're listening and you're like, Lindsey, you have it wrong, shoot me an email. Please do. info@femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com. Because as much as I said, I don't want this to be a political conversation. It is, but I just wanted to give you like the pros and cons and the understanding of what these guidelines are. My biggest takeaway here is definitely eat real food. I'm glad the protein recommendation increased. I'm glad that we are saying now limit alcohol. Those were the massive changes. Everything else was really darn similar. It was just a big marketing thing. We flipped it on its head. It's like nothing else is really that different. It for real. If you read it, and I encourage you to read it because it's only 10 pages long. And the biggest thing that I disliked was the really low grain carbohydrate recommendation. I even just think for like the average American, if we're promoting exercise and movement, like we can have some more grains, and definitely for athletes, like this is just not going to work for you. And then the contradictory piece with the saturated fat intake. Like I am a fan of whole fats, but it's contradictory and it's just not clear. So lots of good stuff in there, lots of stuff that's not that different, and it's just simplified and not that revolutionary, but we'll see in time if the trickle down effects do change our food landscape here in the US or not. Okay, one final point I will make though is that I do think the new movement puts a lot on the individual to say like Americans are unhealthy because you've been doing it all wrong and we've been giving you the wrong advice, and that's not really true. I really believe that dietitians and scientists and health professionals have been giving great nutrition advice for years. Nobody has been saying that ultra-processed foods are super healthy. I have been saying that if you struggle with an eating disorder or you're underfueled and you're an athlete, like you can eat that because that's actually going to help your health. But I'm not talking about the general American guidelines. I'm talking about you as an athlete who's underfueling and your hormones are shot and you're scared, you're having a mental health breakdown because you're scared to eat something. Actually, you would be healthier if you just ate the darn Twinkie. You would be healthier. But when we're making these general sweeping American health guidelines, no dietitian has been saying like ultra-processed foods are really healthy. What we have been saying is sometimes we've been saying ultra-processed foods are sometimes the only food that people have access to. That's a conversation we've been having. And we're not saying we want it to be that way. It's just a reality. Like some food is better than starving. And that is true. That is true. We don't have an issue. Well, we do have a hunger issue in America. It actually still is a problem. So I won't go there. But, we're just saying that, hey, ultra-processed foods are serving some people. Maybe we can do better with that. And we'd like to do better with that. But that's the one thing with this, the movement, and you go on the website, it's kind of been like slamming that Americans have been eating ultra-processed foods because they've been misguided to think they're healthy. And I'm like, that's not true. That's really not true. So those are my thoughts. I'd love to know if you agree or disagree. Truly, you can email me. I'm a real person. You can email me, info@femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. See you in the next episode.
Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed that episode. Please help spread the message of empowering female athletes to be fierce, fit, and fueled by giving this podcast a 5-star review and leaving a comment. You can also help more female athletes by sending this episode to a friend. Head to lindseycortes.com for more resources, information, more episodes, ways to work together, downloadable guides, and ebooks. And if you're interested in becoming a guest on the show or have a guest suggestion, head to lindseycortes.com/podcast, and there's a form for you to fill out to get on the show. Hey, there's more resources on my YouTube channel, Female Athlete Nutrition, Instagram at female.athlete.nutrition, and private Facebook group, Female Athlete Nutrition. I think you get the point. I'm here to support female athletes by fueling better and becoming fierce, fit, and fueled. Most importantly, if you need help, reach out. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next show.